Marcus could feel the weight of the alien world pressing in on him, the unfamiliar air mixing with the feeling of dread that had been creeping into his bones for days. He had been stranded on the planet Xyla 7 for what felt like an eternity. His shuttle had crash-landed far from the designated colony, leaving him isolated on this strange, hostile world. His communication device was broken, his rations were nearly gone, and he had no idea where to go. The planet was far from welcoming. The sky was a pale green, and the thick jungle stretched endlessly around him. Strange noises echoed in the distance, screeches, growls, and the occasional rumble that felt like the earth itself was alive. Marcus had always prided himself on his survival skills, but even he had started to feel the pressure of this alien wilderness. One evening, after a fruitless search for food, he sat down on a boulder, his stomach growling in protest. His eyes scanned the dense foliage around him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He tried to ignore it, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, the quiet too unsettling. That was when he saw her. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping lightly through the underbrush. At first, Marcus thought it was some kind of alien predator, but as she came closer, he realized it was a girl. She was tall, with glowing violet eyes and skin the color of moonlight. Her hair shimmered like silver threads, and her movements were graceful, almost like a dancer. For a moment, Marcus froze, unsure whether to run or stay. But something about her presence calmed him. She wasn't hostile. He could feel that much. In fact, she didn't seem to have noticed him at all, as she moved with purpose, kneeling down to gather something from the ground. Marcus cleared his throat, trying to get her attention. Hey. Can you help me?" The girl froze, her head snapping toward him with a sharpness that took him by surprise. Her eyes studied him carefully, as though she were trying to decide whether he was a threat or not. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she spoke in a language that Marcus couldn't understand. "Hey," he tried again, more urgently this time. "I'm human. I'm stranded here. Can you understand me?" Her gaze softened, and she tilted her head, as though trying to make sense of his words. Then, with a gentle smile, she responded, in halting English, though her accent was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. "You stranded?" Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "Yes, I crashed here a few days ago. I've been trying to find food and water. Can you help me?" The girl seemed to consider his request for a moment, her fingers tapping gently against the ground as if deep in thought. Then, without a word, she stood and gestured for him to follow her. Marcus hesitated for a moment, but then stood, wiping the dirt from his hands. His instincts told him to trust her, though he couldn't explain why. With no other options, he had little choice. They walked in silence, the jungle pressing in on them, but Marcus felt an odd sense of peace. The girl's movements were fluid, and despite her alien appearance, she seemed entirely at ease in this dangerous environment. He followed her closely, careful to stay just a few steps behind. As they moved, he noticed that she had a strange basket-like device on her back, filled with odd fruits and strange-looking plants. After what seemed like an hour, they reached a clearing where a small, glowing pool of water shimmered in the dim light. The girl crouched down by the water's edge and reached into the basket on her back, pulling out some kind of fruit. She handed it to Marcus without a word, her eyes meeting his with a quiet confidence. Marcus took the fruit, studying it for a moment. It was unlike anything he had seen before, round with a smooth, translucent skin. He sniffed it cautiously, then took a tentative bite. The taste was sweet, almost like a combination of melon and something citrusy, and he found himself eating it eagerly, savoring the long-needed sustenance. The girl watched him closely, her expression unreadable, but there was a glint of something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe even approval. As he finished the fruit, Marcus looked at her, his stomach finally satisfied. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you." She seemed to understand his thanks, offering him a soft smile in return. She then gestured to the water, and Marcus realized that she was offering him more. Without a word, he knelt beside the pool and drank deeply, the cool liquid refreshing him more than he could have imagined. For the rest of the evening, the girl stayed by his side, silently watching over him as he rested. It was clear she was a skilled survivor, and though she didn't speak much, Marcus felt a bond growing between them. He had no idea who she was, or where she came from, but in that moment, she was his only hope. As the night drew on, Marcus couldn't help but wonder about her. She had helped him without hesitation, offering him food and water without asking anything in return. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he felt a strange pull toward her, a connection that he couldn't explain. Before he drifted off to sleep, the girl sat beside him, her eyes scanning the darkness as if keeping watch. Marcus had never felt safer. Despite being light years from home on a strange alien world, there was something about her, something comforting, something familiar, even though she was anything but human. And as he closed his eyes, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger story. The next morning, Marcus woke to the soft rustling of leaves. The girl was still sitting nearby, her silver hair gleaming in the early sunlight as she scanned the horizon. The alien world around them had changed in the hours since he had fallen, asleep. The dense jungle that had seemed so menacing the night before now felt more alive with the bright glow of bioluminescent plants and creatures humming in the distance. Marcus stretched, his muscles sore from the previous day's exertions. He had no idea how long he had been stranded on Xyla 7, but he knew one thing for certain now. He wasn't alone. "Good morning," he said cautiously, his voice rough from thirst. The girl's violet eyes met his, and she offered him a small smile. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft but melodic. The way she spoke English was still a little difficult to understand, but it was getting better. It was clear she was trying. Marcus sat up and rubbed his eyes. "What's your name?" he asked, still unsure of how to address her. She tilted, her head as if thinking about how best to answer. "Lyra," she said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lyra," Marcus repeated, a smile creeping onto his face. "I'm Marcus." Lyra nodded, her gaze never leaving him. There was something intense about her eyes, as though they were searching for something deeper. But before he could ask more questions, she stood up and motioned for him to follow her again. Marcus followed her through the jungle, taking note of the beauty around him. Xyla 7 was unlike anything he had ever seen. The plants were lush and colorful, some even moving like they had minds of their own. Strange flowers bloomed in the trees, their petals glowing with an eerie light. In the distance, massive waterfalls cascaded down jagged cliffs, sending mist into the air that shimmered like a curtain of stars. Lyra moved with ease through this otherworldly landscape, her long silver hair swaying behind her like a veil. As they walked, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He had spent most of his life on Earth surrounded by technology and city life, but nothing compared to the untamed beauty of Xyla 7. After a while, they came to a large clearing, the size of a football field. In the center stood a towering structure that looked like it had grown out of the earth itself. It was made of smooth stone with glowing markings etched along the sides. It was unlike any architecture Marcus had ever seen, both organic and alien in design. "Where are we?" Marcus asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Lyra stopped in front of the structure, her hand resting on the stone wall. "My home," she said simply, her eyes softening as she glanced at him. "I live here." Marcus blinked in surprise. This is your home? You live in something like this?" He gestured to the towering structure. Lyra nodded, her expression serene. "Yes, this is the place of my people, the Xylans. We have lived here for many generations. The structure, it is a part of us, it grows with us." Marcus was fascinated. The idea that a building could grow instead of being constructed was mind-boggling. He walked closer, running his hand along the smooth surface of the stone. It was warm to the touch, almost like it was alive. "You're not from Earth, are you?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with a mix of awe and confusion. Lyra shook her head, a soft smile playing on her lips. "No, I'm from Xyla 7. This is my world. My people are different from humans. We live differently. We think differently." Marcus paused, trying to process the enormity of it all. He had crash-landed on a foreign planet, surrounded by an alien species that was so different from his own. It was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was exhilarating. He had never imagined he would find himself in a place like this. "I don't know much about your people," Marcus admitted, "but I'm starting to understand that this place is unlike anything I've ever seen. You live here, and I've never even heard of Xyla 7. Lyra studied him for a moment, her violet eyes reflecting something like curiosity. "You came here by accident?" Marcus nodded. "Yeah, my shuttle crashed. I don't have any way to contact Earth. I've been trying to survive, but..." He trailed off, unsure how to explain the desperation he'd felt in the past few days. "I'm glad you found me." Lyra's expression softened and she reached out to place a hand on his arm. Her touch was warm, gentle. "I'm glad too," she said quietly. A wave of gratitude washed over Marcus, and he felt a bond growing between them, stronger than just their shared survival. There was something about Lyra, something that made him feel at ease, even though he was a long way from home. Without another word, Lyra led him inside the stone structure. It was even more remarkable on the inside. The walls seemed to glow, faintly, and the air was filled with a soft hum as though the building itself was alive. It was cool and calm inside, a stark contrast to the heat of the jungle outside. Lyra showed him to a small room, furnished simply with mats on the floor and strange glowing objects that seemed to serve as both light and decoration. There was a soft, bed-like structure that looked like it had grown from the floor itself. "This is where you will rest," Lyra said, gesturing to the bed. "You are safe here." Marcus looked around, still trying to absorb everything. "I don't know how to thank you, Lyra. You've done so much already." She smiled again, her eyes softening. "You don't need to thank me. You're a guest here. I only ask that you rest and regain your strength." As Marcus lay down on the bed, he glanced at her. "And what about you? What do you want, Lyra?" Her gaze shifted as though she were considering his question carefully. "I want to help you, to make sure you survive. You are not alone anymore, Marcus." Her words lingered in the air as Marcus closed his eyes, a strange feeling settling in his chest. He wasn't sure what was happening between him and Lyra, but one thing was clear. He wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time since his crash, he felt like he had a chance. "You said." The days that followed were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Lyra continued to care for him, teaching him about the customs of her people and the strange, beautiful world she called home. The Xylans, as she had explained, were an ancient race deeply connected to their planet. They lived in harmony with nature, cultivating the land and growing their homes from the very earth beneath their feet. Their technology was advanced, yet it remained in balance with the natural world around them. Though Marcus had always been a man of science, nothing about Xyla 7 seemed to fit within the confines of what he knew. It was as if this world existed, outside of the laws of physics and biology he had studied his entire life. Still, he couldn't help but marvel at the beauty and mystery of it all. The glowing plants, the creatures that roamed the jungle, and the very air that seemed to hum with life. It was all too surreal to comprehend. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus found himself growing more comfortable with Lyra and her world. He had become accustomed to the strange fruits she fed him, their flavors unlike anything he had ever tasted before. The water was clean and refreshing, and he had even begun to learn some of the Xylan language, though it was difficult. Lyra was patient with him, teaching him words and phrases whenever she had the time. But despite the peaceful days, a tension lingered in the air, something Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on. He couldn't ignore the feeling that there was more to Lyra than she was letting on. There were moments when she would look at him with an intensity that was hard to describe, as if she were hiding something important. One evening, after another long day of exploring the alien city, Lyra led Marcus to a small, secluded garden behind the stone structure. The flowers here were different, bright red petals shimmering with a strange light that seemed to pulse with energy. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rustling of the leaves and the soft hum of the alien world around them. "Why are you helping me so much?" Marcus asked suddenly, breaking the silence. He had been holding this question in for days, but now it felt like the right moment to ask. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. For a long moment, she said nothing, her violet eyes studying him carefully. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice soft. "Maybe I just feel connected to you." Marcus frowned. "Connected? How?" Lyra looked away for a moment, her gaze shifting to the glowing flowers around them. "I've never met anyone like you. You're different from anyone I've known." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. There was something in the way she said it that made him uneasy. It wasn't just curiosity, it was something deeper, something that felt almost possessive. He had noticed it before in the way she looked at him, in the way she seemed to want to be around him all the time. He swallowed hard. "I'm not sure I understand. I'm just a human. I'm lost and far from home." Lyra turned back to him, her eyes searching his face. "You don't understand yet, but you will." Before Marcus could respond, a loud noise interrupted their conversation. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the air. Marcus instinctively reached for his sidearm, but it was useless. He had left it behind when he crash-landed, and now, in this alien world, he had nothing to defend himself with. Lyra's expression hardened, and she stepped in front of him, her body tense. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her voice firm. "Lyra, what's going on?" Marcus asked, his heart pounding. He could see the fear in her eyes, something he hadn't noticed before. She was always so calm, so composed, but now there was a flicker of something else. A shadow loomed over them, and Marcus turned to see a group of figures emerging from the trees. They were tall and imposing, their bodies covered in dark armor that shimmered with strange symbols. Their faces were hidden behind masks, but their eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. "They're coming for me," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus took a step forward, but Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "No, stay behind me," she said urgently. "You don't understand. They won't spare you if you get in their way." Marcus's mind raced. Who were these people? Why were they after Lyra? And why did she seem so terrified of them? One of the armored figures stepped forward, his eyes glowing brighter as he locked his gaze on Lyra. "You cannot escape your fate, princess," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "The council has decreed that you must return." Lyra's grip on Marcus tightened, and for the first time he saw a hint of fear in her eyes. "I will not go back with you," she said, her voice shaking. "I refuse to obey your orders." The figure stepped closer, raising his hand as if to strike her. But Marcus instinctively stepped in front of her, holding his ground. "Leave her alone," Marcus said, his voice rough with determination. The figure turned his gaze on Marcus, his eyes narrowing. "You are the human who has been interfering with the princess's plans. You are a threat." Lyra's hand reached out, touching Marcus's arm gently. "No, Marcus, they're not like us. They'll kill you if they have to." The air grew thick with tension as the armored figures surrounded them, their weapons drawn. Marcus could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him, and he realized just how far out of his depth he was. He had no idea who these people were or what they wanted with Lyra, but he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't let them take her. "We have to run," Marcus said urgently, his mind racing for a plan. Now. But before they could move, the leader of the group raised his hand again, and the ground beneath their feet trembled once more. In that instant, Marcus understood the danger they were in. They weren't just enemies. They were a part of something much bigger, something that could destroy everything Marcus had come to care about. And as the figures closed in on them, Marcus realized that the tension between him and Lyra was far more than just a cultural misunderstanding. It was a war. One that was just beginning, you said. Marcus stood frozen, his heart racing as the armored figures advanced, encircling him and Lyra. His hand instinctively clenched into a fist, but without a weapon or any idea of what he could do, he felt completely helpless. He had no experience with alien politics or warfare, and he certainly didn't know who these figures were. But one thing was clear. They were not here to negotiate. Lyra's grip tightened on his arm, her body trembling slightly. The fear in her eyes was enough to send a chill down Marcus's spine. She wasn't just worried about herself, she was worried about him. That thought kept him rooted to the spot, though he couldn't shake the growing panic in his chest. "You will return with us, Princess." The leader of the armored figures spoke again, his voice cold and emotionless. His glowing eyes seemed to pierce through Marcus as if sizing him up. "Your resistance is meaningless." Lyra shook her head, her face pale with determination. "I will not go back. You cannot make me." Marcus glanced at her, bewildered. "Lyra, what is this about? Who are these people? Why are they after you?" Lyra's voice was strained, as though she was holding back the weight of an untold story. "They are from the council," she said, her words clipped, each one weighed down by fear. "They believe that I am a threat to their control. They want me to marry someone from their order, but I will not." The leader of the group stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Marcus. "This human," he sneered, "has no place in this conflict. His presence weakens you. We will deal with him after we return you to the council." Marcus's jaw tightened. He wasn't about to let anyone take Lyra from him. She had saved his life, offered him shelter, and shared a world he couldn't even begin to understand. She was more than just an alien to him now. She was someone he cared for deeply. "Lyra," he whispered urgently, his hand reaching for hers. "We need to get out of here. We can't fight them head on, but we can run. We've got to move fast." She met his gaze, and for a moment Marcus saw something flicker in her eyes, a mix of fear and something else. It was the kind of look that made him realize just how much danger they were in. But before she could reply, the armored figures raised their weapons. A low hum filled the air, and Marcus's senses screamed at him to act. In a desperate move, he grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the dense forest behind the stone structure. The moment they moved, the figures reacted immediately. "Stop," the leader commanded, his voice booming. The ground beneath them shook again, and Marcus felt a sudden pressure in the air. Before he could fully process what was happening, a force slammed into his chest, sending him stumbling backward. He barely caught himself, his heart pounding. Lyra, too, was pushed away by the unseen force, her feet sliding on the ground as she struggled to maintain her balance. "We are not here to play games," the leader said, his voice colder than ever. "You will come with us, Princess, and you will bring this human with you whether he wants to or not." Marcus gritted his teeth, fury rising in his chest. He couldn't let them take Lyra. He couldn't just stand by and watch as they took away the only person who had shown him kindness on this strange planet. Without thinking, he pushed himself to his feet and rushed toward Lyra. But the leader moved faster than he expected. With a swift motion, he raised a hand and a bright flash of light erupted from the weapon he held. Marcus was knocked off his feet, crashing to the ground with a grunt. His vision swam for a moment, the world spinning, as he tried to regain his bearings. "Enough!" Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. Before Marcus could even blink, Lyra was in front of him, her hands raised in a protective gesture. A soft glow surrounded her body, emanating from the very air around them. Marcus stared at her in shock, unsure of what was happening. The armored figures hesitated, their eyes narrowing as they watched her. The leader seemed to sense something had changed in the air. "What are you doing, Princess?" he demanded. "You cannot resist us. You know the rules." Lyra's voice was steady. though the strain was evident. "I am not your puppet. I will never be part of your control, and I will never go back to the council." A bright light flashed from her hands, and the air around them rippled with energy. The force that had knocked Marcus down earlier seemed to retreat for a moment, as though the very atmosphere was bending to Lyra's will. Marcus, still on the ground, watched in awe as Lyra seemed to channel some kind of power he didn't understand. She was different from the person he had met when he first crash-landed on Xyla 7. She was strong, stronger than he had ever realized. The leader of the armored figures snarled, "You dare defy us, princess? You have no idea what you're dealing with." But Lyra wasn't intimidated. Her eyes glowed with the same violet light as before, and her expression was one of quiet resolve. "I will fight for my freedom, and I will fight for him." She glanced at Marcus, her voice growing softer, but no less firm. "I won't let you take him." For a brief moment, Marcus saw something that surprised him. This was no ordinary alien girl. Lyra was more than just a survivor. She was a force to be reckoned with. The leader raised his hand to signal the others, but before he could give another command, Lyra stepped forward. The power she was channeling swirling around her like a storm. She moved faster than Marcus had ever seen anyone move, her body glowing with the energy that seemed to radiate from her every pore. Without warning, a blinding flash of light filled the clearing. Marcus shielded his eyes, but the light was so intense that he couldn't see anything. The next moment, everything was silent. When Marcus opened his eyes again, the armored figures were gone. The ground was still trembling, but the danger had passed. Lyra was standing in the center of the clearing, panting heavily. Her hands were still glowing faintly, but she looked exhausted, like she had given everything to push the attackers back. She collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. "Lyra!" Marcus shouted, rushing to her side. I didn't want to have to do that," she whispered, her voice weak. "But they wouldn't listen." Marcus knelt beside her, his heart racing. "Are you okay?" Lyra nodded slowly, though she looked pale and drained. "I'll be fine," she said softly. "But we need to go. They'll be back." Marcus helped her to her feet, his mind racing. The conflict with the armored figures was far from over. But now, more than ever, he knew that he couldn't leave Lyra behind. Not now. Not when she had risked everything for him. And so, as they ran into the unknown, Marcus knew one thing for sure. He was in this fight now, no matter what it took. He wasn't going to let them tear him away from the only person who had given him a chance in this alien world. "You said?" The sun had long since set by the time Marcus and Lyra found themselves deep within the dense jungle once more. The night was alive with sounds, strange creatures calling out from the shadows, the rustle of leaves as unseen things moved through the trees. The air was thick with humidity, but it was the tension between them that weighed most heavily on Marcus's mind. Lyra was exhausted, her steps slow and deliberate. The display of power she had shown to push back the armored figures had drained her more than she let on. She had only managed to send them away temporarily, and Marcus knew that it wasn't a permanent solution. They weren't safe yet, and they needed to figure out where to go next. "How far are we from your home?" Marcus asked, his voice low, trying not to disturb the night's quiet. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze scanning the darkness as if she were searching for something. Her hand rested lightly on the pulse of her chest, where faint traces of the energy she had used to fend off the attackers still lingered. "We're far enough," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "They won't be able to track us immediately, but it's not enough." "Not yet." Marcus looked at her, feeling a mix of admiration and concern. "Lyra, what's going on? Who are those people? What did they want from you?" Lyra stopped walking, her eyes dark with emotion. She faced him, her expression unreadable for a moment. "They are part of the Xylan Council, the rulers of my people, and they want to control everything, everyone, especially me." Marcus frowned. "Control you? How? You're a princess, aren't you?" She nodded slowly, her eyes distant as if she were reliving a memory she didn't want to share. Yes, I am. But my role was never about power or leadership. It was never my choice. I was raised to be a symbol. My life has always been about what they needed, not what I wanted. Marcus's heart sank as he understood. Lyra had been trapped in a life she didn't choose, caught between her own desires and the demands of her people. It wasn't just about politics, it was about control, about forcing someone into a life they had no part in creating. They wanted me to marry someone from their order, a powerful ally who would help keep the balance of power. But I didn't want that life. I don't want that life. She turned away from him, her voice barely a whisper now. I didn't want to be used as a tool. Marcus stepped closer, his hand gently touching her shoulder. He could feel her tension, under his fingers, the way her body had become rigid with the weight of her past decisions. You shouldn't have to choose between your life and your duty, he said quietly. Lyra's eyes met his, a soft sadness in her gaze. But I do. And now, because I resisted, they will stop at nothing to bring me back. The silence between them was thick, but Marcus didn't back away. He couldn't. He had already crossed a line, connecting with Lyra in ways he hadn't expected. He wasn't going to let her face this alone. We'll figure this out, he said, with more certainty than he felt. I don't know how, but we will. You're not alone anymore, Lyra. She didn't respond right away, but after a long pause she spoke, her voice trembling slightly. I hope you mean that, Marcus, I really do. The moment hung between them, heavy with both fear and hope. Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the tension broke, and Lyra turned to walk again, her steps lighter now, as if she had decided to move forward with him at her side. They continued to make their way through the jungle, deeper into the wilds of Xyla 7. The path was unfamiliar to Marcus, but Lyra moved with purpose, leading the way. He followed, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to ask. He couldn't pretend to understand what Lyra was going through, but he could stand beside her at least. That was all he knew to do. Hours passed, and the jungle began to thin out, the trees giving way to a rocky plateau that overlooked a vast expanse of alien terrain. The moon, Xyla 7's second moon, a pale blue sphere, hung low in the sky, casting a silvery light over the landscape. Lyra stopped at the edge of the plateau, gazing out over the scene with a quiet intensity. Marcus joined her, his eyes tracing the distant horizon. There was something about the way the landscape stretched out before them that made him feel small, insignificant, in the grand scheme of things. But there was also a strange kind of beauty to it. The land seemed untouched, wild and free, just like Lyra. Where are we going? Marcus asked. Lyra turned to him, her eyes soft yet resolute. We need to find the last of the hidden ones. They're the only ones who can help us now. The hidden ones, Marcus echoed, confused. She nodded. They are an ancient group of my people who have broken away from the Council's rule. They are the outcasts, the rebels. They've lived in secrecy for generations, but they have power, knowledge, and resources that can help us fight back. Marcus felt a flicker of hope stir inside him. So, there's still a chance? Lyra smiled faintly, though it was a smile tinged with sadness. It's our only chance. They didn't talk much more that night. Instead, they set up camp near the Ua Plateau, using the rocks and dense foliage for shelter. Marcus had no idea how far they would have to travel to find the hidden ones, but the thought of a possible ally, someone who could help them, kept his mind focused. As they settled down for the night, Marcus glanced over at Lyra. She had her back turned to him, staring out into the vastness of the alien landscape. The light from the moon illuminated her face, and for a moment, Marcus couldn't help but notice how much she had changed since the first time they had met. She wasn't just the alien girl who had helped him survive. She was a leader, a symbol of resistance, and more importantly, someone he had come to care for deeply. The next morning they continued their journey. With each step, Marcus felt the weight of the situation growing heavier. They weren't just running away anymore, they were fighting back. The Zealand Council wouldn't let Lyra go without a fight, but neither would they. And for the first time since his crash, Marcus felt like he had a purpose, something more than just surviving. Lyra had risked everything for him. Now it was his turn to do the same for her. The morning mist still clung to the ground as Marcus and Lyra continued their trek through the alien wilderness. The path was difficult to navigate, but Lyra moved with the ease of someone who knew every rock, every tree, and every hidden path of her world. Marcus struggled to keep up, but he was determined. There was no turning back now. They were heading into uncharted territory, toward the Hidden Ones, the last hope to take a stand against the Zealand Council. Lyra hadn't said much since their conversation on the plateau, but Marcus could feel the weight of her silence. It wasn't just the threat from the council that weighed on her. It was the burden of the life she had been forced to live, a life of expectations and duty that she had never chosen for herself. "We're close," Lyra said suddenly, her voice breaking through his thoughts. Her eyes scanned the surroundings, with practiced precision. Marcus looked around, but all he saw were dense trees and thick underbrush. "Close to what? I don't see anything." Lyra smiled faintly. "Patience. The Hidden Ones live beneath the surface. We're almost there." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Beneath the surface, you mean like a cave system?" Lyra nodded. "In a way. But it's not just any cave. The Hidden Ones live in a place that's part of the planet itself, deep within the roots of the old forests. They're not just hiding. They've made a home in the heart of this world." As they walked on, the air seemed to change. It was subtle at first, but Marcus could feel it. An energy that was different, ancient even. The plants seemed to hum with life, and the trees loomed taller, their branches intertwining like the arms of giants. The forest here felt older than anything Marcus had seen so far, and the further they went, the more he felt like they were being pulled into something bigger than themselves. After what seemed like hours of walking, they finally reached a large clearing. In the center was an enormous gnarled tree, its bark glowing with a soft golden light. The tree's roots stretched out in every direction, disappearing into the earth. Lyra moved toward the tree without hesitation, and Marcus followed, his curiosity piqued. She stopped at the base of the tree and knelt down, her fingers brushing the ground. She murmured something in her native tongue, and for a moment Marcus thought nothing would happen. But then, the ground trembled slightly, and a hidden passageway appeared before them, hidden by the roots of the ancient tree. "This, is it?" Lyra said softly. "The entrance to the Hidden One's domain." Marcus took a deep breath. They were really doing this. They were about to meet the people who could help them stand against the council. This was their chance. But as they stepped into the passageway, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this moment marked the point of no return. They were about to take a step into unknown territory, and there was no way of knowing what would happen next. The tunnel was narrow, its walls lined with glowing moss and vines that lit their way. The air inside was cool, but it felt alive with energy, as if the very space they were moving through was aware of their presence. As they walked deeper into the heart of the planet, the sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls, a rhythmic thud that kept time with the pounding of Marcus's heart. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a vast chamber. The room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadow, and the walls were covered in ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with a soft, otherworldly light. In the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and around it gathered a group of beings, tall, elegant, with the same glowing violet eyes as Lyra, their skin shimmering like starlight. These were the Hidden Ones. They turned toward Lyra as she entered the chamber, their expressions unreadable. But there was a quiet reverence in their movements, and they parted to make way for her. Lyra walked confidently into the center of the room, standing tall before the group. "Lyra," one of the figures said, his voice deep and resonant, "you've returned to us, just as we expected." Lyra bowed her head slightly. "I've come for your help," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The Zealand Council is closing in on me. I need the strength of the hidden ones to stop them. The figure studied her for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. We have watched your struggle, princess, and we will stand with you. But you must understand, this fight is not just yours. It is a fight for the future of all Zelans. Marcus stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. What can we do? We can't keep running forever. The council will keep sending people after her. The figure turned his gaze toward Marcus, as if noticing him for the first time. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced with something else: respect. You are the human who has become entangled in the princess's fate, he said, his voice low and thoughtful. What is your role in this struggle? Marcus hesitated, but then spoke with more conviction than he expected. I'm here because Lyra is more than just a princess to me. She's a person, and I will do whatever it takes to protect her. The figure regarded him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. If you stand with her, you must be prepared to face the full weight of what lies ahead. This is not a battle for the weak-hearted. I'm ready, Marcus said, his voice steady. The figure turned back to Lyra, his expression softening. And what of you, princess? Are you prepared to face the consequences of your defiance? Lyra's voice was unwavering. I have already made my choice. I will not go back to the council. I will fight for my freedom, and for our future. The figure nodded once more, his gaze turning toward the rest of the hidden ones. Then, we shall fight together. We will stand against the council and we will take back what is ours. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glowing with determination. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. But then something shifted in the air. The energy in the room seemed to change, as if it were pulsing with a new purpose. Lyra looked around, her eyes scanning the room. The hidden ones parted, and, in the center, the stone pedestal began to glow brighter. One of the figures raised his hand and the pedestal revealed something, a small, glowing crystal. It floated above the stone, humming with an ancient energy. This, the figure said, is the key to your future. The crystal contains the power to unite the Xylans and break the council's hold, but it must be used wisely. Lyra stepped forward. Her eyes locked on the crystal. What must I do? The figure's voice was quiet but filled with gravitas. You must take it. You are the one who can wield its power, and when the time comes, you must use it to make your choice. Marcus watched in silence as Lyra reached for the crystal, her fingers brushing its surface. The moment her hand made contact, the crystal pulsed with a bright golden light, and the chamber seemed to tremble with the force of its energy. And in that moment, Marcus knew this was it. The future of Xyla 7, and the future of his and Lyra's bond was about to change forever. Lyra held the crystal in her hands, her eyes reflecting the light of its power. She turned to Marcus, her gaze softer now, filled with emotion. Marcus, she whispered, will you stand with me? Will you be my partner, not just in this fight, but in everything that comes after? Marcus took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. Yes, he said, his voice strong and unwavering. I'll stand with you, always. And in that moment, amidst the ancient power of the crystal and the eyes of the hidden ones watching them, Marcus knew that together they would face whatever came next, not just as allies, but as something more, as partners, as equals. And nothing, not even the Xylan Council, could ever take that away.